but tell me a little bit about My Sister's House and your journey to getting there. But first, I'll tell you about the mission of My Sister's House.
Okay.
Because, I'm not sure everybody understands it. I mean, it's one of those things that I've been around Rocky Mount all my life. I've heard of it all my life, but I don't think until maybe the last 15, maybe 20 years that I really understand what My Sister's House mission was. But
Sure. And that's kind of evolved too, to be fair.
Right.
It's changed over time. So we support victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. The sexual assault component was added in the 90s. Human trafficking has just been in the last few years. So there's been, over the course of the 40 years, it's our 40th anniversary,
Right.
Changing into exactly what we do. And so it's not unusual for people to know of us and know not quite sure what we do or think we're limited to certain things. But
Right.
yeah, and we're always trying to be in the community. I spoke at a church every Sunday in October,
Wow.
and some of the weekdays and civic groups, and just letting people know who we are, what we do. I think one of the worst things that can happen is want to help someone and you don't know how.
Right.
And so I want people to know how.
Right.
Who to call. And so that's...
Well, who do you call and how do I help somebody?
Give
me the Yeah, of course.
We have a 24-hour crisis line.
Right.
So that number is 252-459-3094.
Okay.
And that number is always answered by a staff person or a trained volunteer. So we have 24-hour access anytime.
Sure.
I will say 911's a handy number if there's immediate danger.
If you have to.
Right. They get to drive a lot faster than we do, and they get guns on their hips, and they can do things we can't do. But so that law enforcement plays a big part in what we do as well, and keeping everybody safe. So we started in 1981, and it was the women's abuse shelter, and it was started by Christ Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And a lot of churches on Church Street supported that initiative. They sponsored bedrooms, they sponsored the kitchen and things like that. We started out with just a few apartments and all volunteers, no staff. And then in 1986, we bought our shelter. And that's when we became My Sister's House.
Okay.
And since then, we've had tons of support from the community over the years. We have 16 beds currently in our shelter. We shelter anywhere from 1,800 to 1,200 people a year. I say that because COVID's really changed our numbers. People are staying longer, which means we can't bring in more people. So that number's lowered, but the amount of sheltered nights has increased,
Right.
or the average length of stay has increased.
Right.
And so it's a little more difficult now to kind of peg some general numbers, because now and 2 years ago are very different, and they look very different.
Right. So, a lot of people were talking about COVID actually increasing the incidence of domestic abuse and
Absolutely.
violence. Are you seeing that, or have you seen that?
Absolutely. And so one of the things there's a lot of factors that go into it, but one of it is you don't have that outlet. You don't get to go to work. You don't get to go to school. You don't have that break from each other. You're on top of each other. You also don't have teachers physically seeing the kids to see that maybe there's something going on
Right.
at home. You don't have that coworker you can confide in. You don't have that release, that escape. Also, a lot of people lost their jobs, had a reduction in income, especially service industry, waitresses, hairdressers, that was gone. And now your kids are at home, and you've got to figure out a way to educate them. You've got to have good internet. You've got to have access not only to the internet, but it's really hard to do your schoolwork on a phone. So you also need a device to do the schoolwork with, and then feed your kids during the day when usually they were at school. And so there's a lot of stress came with COVID that was unexpected. The very first month, March 2020, when the stay-at-home order went into place, we saw a 211% increase in our crisis line calls. It was immediate for us.
200%.
211%.
Wow.
And then April was 48%. May dropped down to 24%. But May, June, July, and August are traditionally our busiest months.
Okay.
So they were still a good quarter above. But in the busiest time of year, we're a quarter
Right.
above.
So you're measuring that month to prior year, or are you measuring it
Prior
to
year.
prior month? Okay.
Prior year.
Okay, got
It's
it.
very seasonal. So traditionally, summer's very busy for us. People are out of school. If you're going to make a move, that's a time to make a move. You don't
Right.
have to pull your kids out of school or have them miss school. Also, warm temperatures increase violent crime. You can ask any police officer that, unfortunately. So the hotter it gets,
Right.
the more violent it gets. Memorial Day, 4th of July, when people are drinking and having parties and things like
Right.
that can increase it as well. And so the summer months we kind of brace ourselves for the summer, but really it hasn't stopped really in the last 18 months. It's just stayed elevated.
Sure.
And the holidays tend to do empty out. We're never empty, but a lot of people want to be home and be with their kids and have their kids have both parents. And so there's usually a honeymoon phase around the holidays. And the cases we get during the holidays are our most severe, usually by far, because it has to be so severe that you don't want to see your family or your batterer's family, or you have to leave. I
Right.
mean, you just have to leave. So I would say that normally, which is a weird, I don't know that we're going to ever become normal again.
Right.
But normally summers are very busy. The winter usually slows up quite a bit, and the fall and the spring are somewhere in between. But since COVID has started, it's really changed things.
Okay.
And part of that, I think, too, goes into you can still choose to have your kids online. So you don't have to take your kids to that spot where someone knows that they are every day. A lot of times the batterer is the parent, and so they can check out the kid or they can sign the kid out.
Right.
And if there's a delay in notifying the school, of course, they're just going to release the child to this parent. So some parents are choosing to keep the online just for the safety of their kids and to know where their kids are and to keep them safe.
Right. Wow. So, how do you get your support? How do you get the funding now? I mean, it was the Genesis story is with the Episcopal Church and with several other churches in the area. How do you continue to get your support even now?
Sure. So we get a lot of state grants. There's the North Carolina Council for Women. There's the Governor's Crime Commission. That's our core funding. So that covers salaries, rent, communications, email, or internet, phones, things like that. And so when people give to My Sister's House, it doesn't go to those kind of expenses, that overhead expense, because that's what the state covers. What the state doesn't cover is things like diapers and shoes and special food or medical expenses. And so those kind of things we depend on the community, small businesses, individual donors, and churches to give us. We have churches that give to us monthly. We have churches that give to us yearly as a part of their budget. And so those kind of donations are really what makes our work possible, because we can serve the needs of the individual immediately. It's not a one-size-fits-all at all. Everyone needs something different from us, and so we're able to tailor the resources we can give them based on the donations that we have.
So, what's the average length of stay or the average tenure for somebody once they make a call and they've connected with you? Then,
Sure.
and then how do you transition people? I mean, that's a big part of it too, right?
Yes. So 27 days was the average length of stay for last year.
Okay,
That
wow.
went up from 22 the year before,
Right.
and that a lot was with COVID. A lot of places went, they reduced the services they offered, or they had appointment only, things like that. So it was harder to get the community resources. And that's really what we do at the shelter. We have a family caseworker, and she connects with community resources. We help people find jobs. We help people get job training. We do resume writing. This is a small thing, but it came up a few years ago. Someone, an older lady, had her resume on a thumb drive because she asked someone to help her with a resume, and they said, well, it won't do you much good printed. Here's a thumb drive.
Right.
And I thought, oh, of course, that's what we need to do. So from now on,
Right.
you get a paper copy and
Right.
you get a thumb drive. So that goes with you after you leave us. And it's such a small thing, but we try to anticipate the needs of our clients and meet those needs. And so we, at the shelter, it may be DSS, there may be some kind of support like food stamps that the family can qualify for, and we do those things. It does take a while to transition. Some people come to us with college degrees and already have a job. Some people come to us with a job, or their job will move them. A lot of people, especially working for chains, if there's one in Nashville or Rocky Mount or Wilson, they can be more easily relocated and maintain their job. So that's something we've never really had an issue with, was the relocation, that we need this person to keep their job, but we need them to be somewhere else so they're safer. Sometimes people transition into their own apartment. Oftentimes trauma bonds people. So we often have clients who befriend each other at the shelter and then get a place together. We have people who go back home. The average American woman returns to her batterer 7 times.
Seven
That's
times.
7 times.
Wow.
So a lot of times I get asked what percentage of people go back, and we don't really measure that. We measure how many
Frequency,
times.
yeah.
Yes. And then that's the national average that we see as well. And so we we always want to be a welcoming place each and every time. And I think that's the most important part.
Well, that's got to be a little frustrating. So,
It
we'll
is.
call it a frequent flyer. And
Sure.
and at some point you're going, oh my God,
Yes.
why are you back? Why did you go back?
Yes, and a lot of family members do that to our clients, and they feel like they have no one else at this point but us because mom said I'll just go back, or my friend said I could stay this time but not next time, or the kids can come and stay but I can't come and stay. So we see it, but we also understand that pattern of abuse. If you go out with someone to dinner and they hit you, you wouldn't go out to dinner with that person anymore. But if you have a house with someone, if you're married to someone, if you have kids with someone, if you love them, and it's not always bad, it wouldn't be. No one would stay if it was always bad.
Of course.
And so you have that cycle of abuse where it's going to get better, it does get better, then it doesn't, or you anticipate holidays being better, or when the baby grows up and we can sleep more during the night, or whatever the next thing is. When the child graduates high school, moves out, there'll be less stress, and that just doesn't come. And I think we do a really good job at each time just being there for them and being supportive and glad that they left again, because the worst part would be is if they went and didn't leave again. And I think that just comes from years of seeing clients and years of training to hear this over and over, which is really frustrating for family members, of course. I couldn't imagine having someone I really care about telling them, okay, you got to stop doing this.
Right.
And you feel like you need to set up boundaries, but really those kind of boundaries just make them want to go back to their batterer who hasn't given up on them or who will let them come back. So it can work against you sometimes by saying, I won't help you next time.
Right.
Because then the only other option is that person that's been abusive.
So how many rooms or beds do you have?
16 beds.
16 beds. So what happens if you got a full house?
We call other local shelters. Hannah's Place in Halifax is probably who we call the most. We work with them really, really well. Also, if the batterer may know where the shelter is, lives near the shelter, then that's not a safe place for them. So we would move them automatically. Since we've had our shelter since 1986, a lot of people do know where the shelter is. Their church has done a project there, Eagle Scout projects.
Might as well be in the Yellow Pages, right?
Yeah,
With a neon sign.
A little bit, yeah. So we do a very thorough questionnaire and make sure that there's no way that they know or could find out easily. And if anyone sees their batterer's vehicle drive by, we immediately move them. But I would say Hannah's Place is who we work with the most. They're sometimes we've even met at the county and swapped because they had someone that needed to come and we had someone that needed to go. I will say with COVID, we've gotten more creative with our sleeping arrangements. We've had 20 to 25 people at a time at the shelter with 16 beds because a lot of the shelters are just as busy as we are. I used to tell my staff we don't put people on couches. Everybody gets a bedroom. That's not always possible, especially now. So we do use couches. We use hotel rooms, especially if it's temporarily, if we know someone's about to leave. A lot of times our clients are waiting for a paycheck to leave, or they're waiting for the first for their apartment to be available. So we know they're going to leave. And so if we can get someone in a hotel for a weekend to pass that time, then that's something that we do. Pretty commonly.
So I understand you guys are starting a food bank, and so that's kind of a new program or something I'm not familiar with. So
we've always had it.
Okay.
Yes, but Miss Grace's family reached out to us and wanted to do something to honor her, and so that we had a dedication for her. For the support of the food pantry. Food is always a big one that clients need. So we have a pantry in our shelter for our clients, but we also have one in our Nashville office. And something we found out during COVID was people who hadn't worked with us in 6 months or a year came back because they had lost their job or had a loss of income and they needed food and they needed toiletries. And we were excited because we thought, well, yes, please don't go back to your batterer for these things. And so if we can give you a pack of diapers and a box of food and that gives you the tank of gas to get to work, that's what we're going to do. And so we've always had a food pantry, but I think it's been much more utilized in the last 2 years with the pandemic, with people really deciding about food, medicine, gas, things like that for their children and themselves. And so I was really proud of the way that my staff is, of course, with the clients, that they felt comfortable that they could come back to us instead of going to their batterer. So it's always existed. We've always done food boxes. We do holiday boxes for the families that aren't in the shelter. And then we have meals provided by families in the community for the holidays at the shelter. So it's something we've always done, but we've really realized the value of it more recently when we had people who were making very tough decisions with very little resources. So
Well, look, I'd love to offer our space here at 130 South Franklin Street as a drop-off place here in town, if that's something that would be a benefit to you.
Yes,
And
that'd be wonderful.
we'll certainly host a spot for you because what you do is very invaluable service to the folks in the community that we have.
Sure.
So tell me your personal journey. I mean, you're a young lady. I mean, how do you end up in a home for battered women and the various other causes you have? I mean, it's going to be a hard job. It's going to be a heart-wrenching job. It's going to be almost a mission, right?
Yes. Oh, very much so. We do serve men.
Right, of course.
No,
But
it's
I think
fair
that's
to
important.
say.
Yeah.
It's fair to say.
Yeah.
And we do shelter men. A lot of shelters in the state do not. They're supposed to, but they don't. And we do, just because the layout of our shelter allows for us to separate people by floors. And so we can put a male survivor into our shelter. So we do. It's usually only 1 or 2 a year. It doesn't happen a lot. Men are more likely to have the income to get a hotel or the resources. They're also less likely to have the children. And so generally, when they're victims of domestic violence, they have other choices that women often don't have, just by the nature of
Well, it's just kids alone. I mean,
Yes,
just
kids
traveling alone
I
is a
have
big
5.
deal.
I know.
Right, I've
what
got
I do with
4.
5. Yeah, what would you do? And I think about that when larger families call us with 5, 6, 7, 8 kids. We have to find a way to get them all into a space. And we have cots and we have bassinets, and we'll throw 2 toddlers together that are
Right.
brother and sister, or sisters in a bed, just to make that space. And that's how we get those high numbers, is we've just got to make do, but we do what we have to do. And so for me personally, domestic violence touched my life before I was born. It was a heavy impact in my family. And so I grew up knowing the severity of domestic violence and knowing that it can end very badly. And so that was something not really discussed in my family, but it was always known. It wasn't a hush-hush secret thing either, that you don't let someone hit you, and that someone can kill you. Someone that you love can kill you. Your spouse or partner can kill you. And so at 15, I was at Southern Nash Senior High. I'm from Nash County. I started
Firebirds.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. And I live in Northern's district now. I feel so bad for my kids. But I started volunteering at 15. We actually have a newspaper article from 2002 with me doing a drive for my sister's house. And at the time, a lot of people were volunteering with animals or with kids, and we didn't have that mandatory volunteering that high schools have now, which I think is great. But it was just something that I knew was real and could happen and did happen.
Sure.
And so I started volunteering at 15 through high school, college. I would go speak at churches and help them set up things for our Christmas program. And then after I graduated college, I was on the board of directors. And then the job became open and I became executive director. And so February makes 5 years. So I feel like, in a sense, I've grown up at my sister's house. I've spent a good 20 years of my life there.
I was going to say, you have a 20-year career and you're barely 30, right?
Yeah, it was interesting when someone called from the community about my experience, because they saw my picture in the paper and they're like, well, she's got about 20 years in. What do you have?
That's right.
So I've seen it, and I think there's an advantage in seeing it as a volunteer, seeing it as a board member, and then seeing it as an employee, because each step I learned something new or saw it from a different perspective.
So what are the things that you learned during that journey?
Yes.
I mean, that's got to be interesting.
Yeah, and watching it grow and change and expand, and the services that we're able to give to our community and answer the needs of our community. No one expected COVID, and how we responded. Many agencies around us and across the state and country closed. We didn't. I sat down with my staff. I have 8 full-time staff members, and I said, what do we do? And the phone's not stopped ringing, and the doorbell keeps ringing. What do we do? And we agreed that we wouldn't close, and we didn't. You can't get a protection order if you're not in the courthouse. There are just some things you have to do in person. And so we made that decision, and we didn't close through the pandemic. And that's something that was a hard choice, but I'm really proud. It was definitely made as a staff decision. We agreed that we were serving people in crisis while being in crisis. Most of us have kids in school, so school was out, or we had parents we were caring for that we were worried about getting sick. So I think it really just speaks volumes of the staff of my sister's house, that in their own personal crisis, that they were willing to come in each day and serve those in crisis as well. So.
Well, that's awesome. So speaking of being in crisis, right, we've gone through a COVID year. How can somebody donate money to my sister's house? I know that you have tried to do a fundraiser. It's been sort of a stop-start, and
Yes.
relative to COVID and various other
Well,
things.
and we
But
want to be careful and keep everybody
of course, no, I think
safe
that's absolutely
and healthy.
appropriate.
Yes.
But I'm just pointing out the challenge of raising money.
Sure.
That's something that you certainly have to work through.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about how I can help or engage, whether it's time, money, or resources.
All those things are good things, yes. We are going to have an online auction. We run basically everything through our Facebook page. So it's My Sister's House of North Carolina. There's more than one in other states. That's why we added that part, because
Okay.
it gets a little tricky sometimes to make sure you're given to the right place. We're going to have an online auction, and we've had a lot of local businesses donate things for it from November 12th through the 19th. Normally, when we have our dinners and our galas, we have an auction. And last year, we did an online auction and had a great response. And so we're hoping for that again this year. And then we have a sponsorship of shelter nights. And that's something we started about 2 years ago. We figured up the amount of the expense for a night of shelter was about $25.
Okay.
So our per diem for meals are $12.50 a day for those 3 meals a day. And the other $12.50 is for everything else, the bedding, the electricity, and all those taxes.
Surely
and
does
all
not
that
include labor.
Oh,
Not
no.
possibly labor.
Oh, actually, no. I'm sure. I'm certain we didn't include labor
Yeah,
in
so
that.
I mean, I think you need to, though.
But I think it's a very tangible number. Sometimes people don't give because they feel like whatever they can give wouldn't make a difference.
Okay.
And 25 is a very tangible number. That's a night of shelter right now. And $100 is a night of shelter for a woman and 3 children. And it's a very tangible, obtainable amount. And so when I tell people, $25 is a night of shelter, it makes them feel that they can really contribute, and they are contributing to something that's very worthwhile. And so we have calendars in our office, and when people make donations to our shelter night fund, we write their name, or we do in honor of people, in memory of people. We do birthdays. I buy a night of shelter every year for my kids' birthdays. So when they come to my office, they find their month and they're looking for their name to make sure I did it. And so it's a ongoing fundraiser that we have, but I think a lot of people appreciate knowing specifically what that amount means.
Right.
It does take a lot to run an operation that covers 2 counties. I mean, we cover from Middlesex to Pine Tops. We have offices in Nashville and Tarboro, then our safe house, and then we have a second season our store. There's a lot of moving parts, but at the end of the day, it is about that night of safety. It is about keeping that person safe tonight, and that's ultimately what we're here for.
So tell me about some of the items on the auction. Tell me again how to access it. I know you
Sure.
ran through the website.
Sure.
But, that's coming up, so I think that's something we ought to really talk about.
Sure. So it's going to be listed on our Facebook page, My
course.
Sister's House of North Carolina, and that's really the easiest format we've found for auctions. It's user friendly. You don't have to create an account. You just bid. We've had quite a bit of art donated. We have a lot of local artists that support us with hosting paint nights for us and things like that in the community, and so they donate art. We have jewelry donated. I have to think what's in my office. We
Yeah.
normally end up with all kinds of very practical things, also oil changes, car washes, that kind of thing. I'm most excited, I think, about a birdhouse. Rebecca Watkins is a local artist, and she painted a birdhouse, and it's beautiful. And if you have a beach house, that's the birdhouse you need. It's a beachy themed birdhouse. So it's sitting on my desk right now. We have a lady, Joyce Wolf in Wilson, who makes a quilt every year for My Sister's House. And so she's made a very special quilt for us. And I own a few of hers, and I tend to bid on that quite a bit.
There you go.
You just can't get those kind of things in the store like the way that they're made. And so we have longtime donors that have donated over the years. And when we call, it's what do you need? So we're really fortunate in that way. But I do think there's a good diversity between jewelry. We have kids' items. We have items for men, items for women, all kinds of art, different kinds of classes and things like that, memberships to different things in the community.
Well,
so
good.
it's a good mix. It's a good mix. We still got stuff coming in.
No, I understand. And there's an opportunity to do that, maybe. So how do if I want to give something to you, how do I do that? Call you up, I guess?
Just call the office.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to donate anything for the auction, one of the Delta sororities in the community, the alumni sorority, donated a purse,
Okay.
a new Coach bag that's purple, because our domestic violence awareness color is purple.
Okay.
And so they donated that on behalf of their sorority. So there's lots of different ways, even if your business doesn't have something maybe tangible that other people can use, to donate. And so if you need suggestions, we can also help with that as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That is
yeah.
wonderful news. And tell us quickly about your store.
Sure, a second season.
Yep.
About 3 years ago, we got a small business grant to renovate it. 'Cause we don't, the money from it goes to my sister's house, so we don't spend money renovating it. But once we got this grant, we did, and it's very boutique-y now. I'm very proud of it. It's very cute. It's open on Saturdays right now for the public from 10 to 3. It's over by Mama's Pizza and Brian's Cheesesteak, and that's Bienvenue Plaza. That's what was
right.
escaping
There you
me.
go.
Bienvenue's Plaza. We will expand the hours back out like we used to. This was just under COVID. We're trying to be consistent. If there's short staff at the shelter, we've got to have that covered. And so we want to have it for the community. It is there for the community, but really it exists for the clients. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Our clients shop there for free for them and their children. They can go anytime. All the staff have keys, so we take them to the store when it's not Saturday. They get to try on clothes. And I think there's such a dignity there to not dig through a box or dig through a bag or hope something fits or makes this work. It's all hung by size and steam cleaned, and it's, all the pants are together, and it's just like a boutique store, and we have dressing rooms, and you can try on those things. And when you've left everything behind, or if you've never been someone who needed to work in an office or for a job interview, dress up, or for court, and you don't have those kind of clothes, to be able to go pick, try on, have your choice, and not just whatever we have, you have, but to get to choose. I think that offers so much dignity to our clients, and we're there to give them the tools and the resources, but they do it themselves. They get that job. We might help type the resume, but they get the job. We might provide a dress, but it's them that gets the job, or them that represents themselves in court. And so I think it's just so important to have a clean, nice space where they can shop.
Sure. No, I think it's
in a sense.
outstanding. And
Yeah.
and so again, if I want to donate to that, I guess I just call my sister's house, or
Sure.
or I am you on Facebook,
Yeah.
or however I can connect with you.
We take donations Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 at the Nashville office.
Okay.
And that's 210 West Church Street in
Say that
Nashville.
again.
210 West Church Street, Nashville. It's important because there's a Church Street in Rocky Mount, Nashville.
Right.
And you can call before you come if you want to make sure. And then at the store on Saturdays, we take donations as well. We take shoes, purses, clothes for men, women, and children, and just about anything.
And so what's the biggest thing it need? Children's stuff, women's stuff,
Boys' clothing.
boys' clothing.
And as a mother of 4 boys, I think it's because boys tear up their
I was
clothes
going to say,
so
they're
much.
not user friendly.
Yes. And I think because with girls, with my one daughter, we buy such nice clothes that those get taken care of. And so we get a lot of child donations, baby and child donations. Not a lot of boys, and not a lot for middle school age, high school age. And they come with their mothers too. And so that kind of age range, I think middle school and high school is probably the most neglected, but overall boys.
So Emily, on behalf of the city of Rocky Mount, I want to give a commemorative plaque to my sister's house for 40 years of the work that you've been doing in our community. I want to thank you, your board, your staff, all the members, and everybody who's touched my sister's house through the last 40 years, because it certainly has done a great service for those in need. And so, again, on behalf of the city of Rocky Mount, congratulations on 40 years.
Thank you so much. It's a big milestone. Unfortunately, I don't think domestic violence is going to end anytime soon, but I am glad that we're there. I'm glad we're there to answer the phone and answer that call when someone needs it. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah, and we hope that you continue on for another 40 years, although I don't plan to be here to give that plaque.
Sure. And I might not as well. Yes.